Guitar Center files for an IPO. Joe Bonamassa releases his new 1959 Epiphone Lazarus guitar. And did you know your Epiphone is actually more like a Norlin era Gibson than you thought it was? Coming right up. Before we get started today, I'd like to remind everybody that we're in the middle of a subscription drive for this channel. We're trying to reach 1,000 subscribers so that we can start doing live streams and all that fun stuff. I promise you, after we hit 1,000, I won't bug you about it again. I'm a kind of build it and they shall come type of guy. But before we can really get to that stage, you need to help me out get to 1,000 subscribers. If you haven't subscribed yet, please take the time to hit that subscription button. I really appreciate it and I thank you so much. Now, on to the news. So our first news story for today is about the Guitar Center. Apparently the Guitar Center has filed the initial documents to get themselves listed as an IPO. Now, if you think back to just last December, when the Guitar Center was coming out of bankruptcy, you'll say to yourself, wow, that's fantastic. What a great turnaround that they made, that they were able to come out of bankruptcy just last December and start filing for an IPO just now in September of this year. Well, let's take a deep dive into why that is, in my opinion. In the market, they were bought over at least 4 times. There was Aries, there was Bain, there was Carlisle Group, which is the current one, Brigade, there was Brigade. So they incurred a lot of debt with these private equity firms that were buying them up and just basically trading it around like a trading card. So even with them filing for bankruptcy and coming out of that, shedding a lot of debt, they still had all this debt. So I guess now, since they were able to shed that amount of debt through the bankruptcy, whatever they were able to do via that process, now they're trying to pass the rest of the debt off to the public. Yay! Because essentially that's what this would be doing. If you bought shares into this company, once it became an IPO, the top people in those investment equity firms would be able to cash out and basically leave the public with the debt. So yeah, that's not such a great trade-off, in my opinion. In exchange, we get all the second-hand and wall-blemished Fenders and Gibsons that we can have our fill on. It's a pretty sweet deal, not. Yeah, let's really take a step back and realize that this is a heavily indebted company. A lot of manufacturers and a lot of producers of guitars, pedals, effects, whatever, keyboards, started moving over to Sweetwater when they were going through their bankruptcy, because they were seeing a lot of their competitors and sometimes themselves not getting paid for the products that they sent to the Guitar Center and getting written off. So yeah, not such a great deal for everybody involved, in my opinion. I will keep you posted on this. A lot of really interesting things coming out of the music world. We didn't talk about it, and I didn't mention it in the crawler here, but Gibson also is starting to sell shares into instruments. As a matter of fact, a guitar that I heavily mocked on this channel, which is the Slash Double Neck Relic, which was a guitar that was $18,000 at the time and nobody was buying it, now somehow has magically turned into a $60,000, $70,000, $100,000 instrument that you can buy a $5 share in. You know, so there are some really weird things going on out there. I would advise for most people to not take my advice. I'm not a financial advisor, but I would look at it really carefully before stepping into either one of those propositions. Not prepositions, I got a preposition for it. But anyway, yeah, I wouldn't do it. So let's move on. Next up, Joe Bonamassa. You know how much I love Joe. I think Joe is a fantastic person, a great curator of really fantastic vintage guitar and gear, and just a great player all the way around. And he has a contract with Epiphone to release, I think, basically a new guitar every year, and this is going back to 2013 or so, 2012. So this year's Joe Bonamassa model happens to be a very interesting one. It's actually the first time that Joe has released a 1959 model. So this is the 1959 Lazarus Epiphone model. It's based upon Joe's 1959 Lazarus guitar, which you can see here. In the before picture, you can see where somebody in 1961 bought this guitar for $100. You have to understand that these were not considered to be holy grail guitars in 1961, 2 years later. Somebody spray painted it red, and it's remained that way until Joe stumbled upon it, made an offer on it, and bought it, and turned out to be this fantastic burst underneath. And this next photo shows the Epiphone model along with the Joe Bonamassa Lazarus, so you can see a comparison. This photo was done by a member of the My Les Paul Forum. There was a lot of complaints about the quality of the Epiphone photo, so he said, I'm going to take 5 minutes and clean this up so you can see how it really looks. So shout out to him for doing that for us. It really does look fantastic. I'm actually kind of excited about this guitar. Its specs are identical to this guitar here behind me, the 1959 Les Paul, kept with the exception of the top, which I happen to dig that color. That's actually a wonderful honeyburst color. So, or, what do they call it? Iced tea. What's that even, iced tea? It's more like a honeyburst. Yeah, I really like that. So, interesting enough, this one retailed at $7.99. The Joe Bonamassa model will retail at $8.99 because Joe's got to get his cut. Joe's got to get paid, which we don't fault him on that. But if you didn't get the opportunity to get the 1959 model here behind me, I'd have to say that this would be a winner. This would be a way to go because it's exactly the same specs with, I think, a more interesting top on it than actually this one was offered. The only difference is somewhere on it, either on the case or on the guitar itself, it's going to say Joe Bonamassa, but not such a big deal. Not a deal breaker for me. So yeah, something to look out for. Something that if I didn't have this one, I would get one. I don't double up on guitars. If it does it, it does it. I don't need two of them myself personally here in the studio. But again, if you are in the market for a great Epiphone and a Les Paul, I would hold out and save your money and pick that one up as soon as it becomes available. Okay, and that brings us to our last subject today. Let's go into a commentary about the construction of Les Pauls. Did you know that your Epiphone Les Paul was constructed like the Norlin era guitars? Now, why is that? Well, let's go back in time to the late 1960s, between 1969 and 1975, the beginning of the Norlin era of manufacturing at Gibson. Let's even go a little further back to that, to around the late 60s, 65, 66, 67 over at Fender, when they began using sandwich body construction methods for manufacturing their top high-end guitars. Taking, for example, a piece of mahogany then a veneer of maple, then a piece of mahogany, and then again a maple cap on top of that. The case, just as an example of how you would make a sandwich body guitar. Jimi Hendrix had a Stratocaster made by the top builder over at Fender for him employing this method. So this was not a cheap manufacturing method. It was not a cost savings method. It was more of an ecological issue because it was a lot easier for them to use small pieces of wood, blocks of wood, and construct a guitar. It was less wasteful for them as a manufacturer. They could get more out if they used this method. So this was a very common manufacturing method going into the 1970s. I remind you also over at Gibson as well in the 1950s, the gold tops were multi-piece as well. So they were not solid body. They were all gold tops were multi-piece bodies. So it's not a new concept. However, it really became the modern way of making guitars from 69 to around 75. Ibanez, again, like I said, Fender and Gibson started taking it on. So during the Norlin era, again, they started creating these pancake body guitars, three-piece necks, long neck tenon. So yeah, so this design technique was also being done over at Gibson. Gibson was employing this manufacturing process when it came to their customs and their deluxes, and also the 68-69 standard as well. So these were pancake bodies, multi-piece necks, long neck tenon. And so this manufacturing process was the way to go. In the 70s. It was the new modern way of doing it. When Gibson moved the Epiphone factory over to Japan in 1970 to Matsumoto to the Matsumoku factory, this manufacturing process was just moved over to that factory. They were merely doing and echoing the way that Gibsons were being made at that time. Now, the traditionalists did not like this design change. They preferred the 50 designs, more solid bodies on the standards and the customs, and they didn't like a lot of the other aspects as far as the pickups are concerned. A lot of things the traditionalists just rejected, and so you began this really negative viewpoint of the Norlin era guitars. And then from 76 until the Henry J era, they really took a hit at Gibson because their QC issues took a hit when they moved to Nashville for union reasons. And so it was a double tsunami of really bad things that happened to Gibsons in the late 70s, but those early 70s guitars, I will remind you, were made by the same guys who made the late 50s guitars. And so therefore that construction technique really is a fantastic way of going. It's not an invalid way of going, it is just another way of going that I think is fantastic for a lot of the reasons that I just stated. It made sense. However, again, the traditionalist did not like those design changes. And so when the Henry J era came on, all that stuff was washed away, and the 50s manufacturing techniques through the custom shop at Gibson started back again. However, over in Japan at Epiphone, they were still manufacturing in that way, which is why today you see manufactured Epiphones similar to the manufactured Norlin era guitars. It was a manufacturing technique that's a little scary that they haven't changed it for over 40 years, almost 50 years. However, it is a valid way of making guitars. It doesn't demean the guitars, it doesn't make them cheap. It was just the style at that era when the factory moved over to Japan. So something to chew on, something to think about. I will end the show today with that. I thank you so much for watching. I enjoyed bringing it to you. And until the next one, you guys take care. Bye-bye.